Dear students, welcome to Creative Educational Idea. Let's know about what is lyric poetry. A lyric poem, which is any fairly short poem uttered by a single speaker. The poem which is short as well as it is uttered by a single person and it expresses the state of mind and it expresses a thought or feeling. Understood? Which expresses its thought or feeling by a single person. This is called lyric poetry. Lyric. Understood? Lyric can be different types, and I will also elaborately explain about the types of lyric. So it is a poem which is expressed by a single speaker and it a process of thought or feeling with the process of thought or feeling. The lyric the chief quality of a lyric poem is emotional or intensity. Understood? And it expresses the heart of the, it may be expressed the joy, sorrow and surprise. This is called lyric. So it is definitely, this is personal. Lyric is usually personal, that is the poet expresses his own feelings in it and it attributes with beauty, variety of music. Let's know about it. In the first part, the theme is introduced in the lyric. In the second part, the theme is enlarged. And the third part, the theme reaches its climax. Spontaneity is an important quality of a lyric poem. The poet sings effortlessly because of an inner urge of self-expression. It expresses the poet's feelings or thought. It is completely expressed by a single speaker. And in the first part, it is introduced. Second part, it is enlarged. And third part, it reaches its climax. Let's know the characteristics of a lyric. It expresses personal or emotional feelings. One. And into it does not tell a story. Like ballad, it does not tell a story. It has song-like qualities. It is usually short. Which one? Lyric. Lyric is usually short. It is personal and emotional feelings. It creates personal and emotional feelings. It does not tell a story. It has song-like qualities. It is usually short. In olden days, it was sung with lyre. It always uses first person's point of view. Understood? Take a glance on the types of lyric. There are many different types of lyric poem, like that love song, patriotic song, hymn, elegy, which means a mournful poem, ode, which is addressed to a person or thing. Understood? So there are many different types of lyric like love song, patriotic song, hymn, elegy, ode, sonnet. Let's know about ballad. What is the definition of a ballad? What is the definition of a ballad? So ballad, I have already explained in my previous classes that the ballad is a narrative poem which tells a story. So it is a narrative poem which tells a story. Which tells a story. So a ballad is a type of poem that tells a story and traditionally it was set to music. It is a ballad. Ballad is a narrative poem which tells a story and traditionally it's set to music. So it is the oldest poetic form in English. Which one? Ballad. Ballad is the oldest poetic form in English and it is the narrative poem which tells a story and their story is traditionally set to music also, and it is the oldest poetic form in English. Let's go to the next point. What is an example of ballad poem? So I told you that ballad is a narrative poem which tells a story, and the literary ballad form include John Keats' Dame Sans Mercy, John Keats' Labelle Dame Sans Mercy, and Thomas Hardy's During the Wind and Rain, and Edgar Allan Poe's Annabel Lee. These are ballads. Understood? Take a glance on the features of ballad poem. What are the three features of ballad poem? Ballad emphasizes strong rhythms, repetition of key phrases, and rhymes. Ballad emphasizes strong rhythms, repetition of key phrases, as well as rhymes. Let's know about sonnet. The sonnet is a popular classical form that has compiled up for centuries. Traditional sonnet is a poem of 14 lines. Understood? Sonnet is a poem of 14 lines and employing one of the several rhyme scheme also, and adhering to tightly structured thematic organization. Let's know about what is called sonnet. A sonnet is a formal poem, and it has 14 lines. This is a poem of 14 lines, and each line contains 10 syllables. A sonnet in sonnet, each line has 10 syllables, and sonnets are in iambic pentameter. Understood? Which means the line has 10 syllables as well as it has 5 pairs. And sonnets lines are in iambic pentameter. Take a glance on who is the father of sonnet. Petrarch. Petrarch is the father of sonnet. Let's know about what are the 5 characteristics of sonnet. It has 14 lines, variable rhyme scheme, strict metrical construction. Understood? These are the characteristics of sonnet. What is a 15-line poem called? The 15-line poem is called Rendezvous. Rendezvous. And it is composed of 15 lines, and this is known as Rendezvous. Rendezvous poems contains a fixed verse form divided into 3 stanzas, a quintet, a quatrain, and a sestet. Take a glance on what is the 8-line poem called. The 8-line poem is called octastich. Understood? 8-line poem octastich, and it is also called octave. Understood? Octave. What is a 14-line poem called? The poem which contains 14 lines. This is called gloge. This is called gloge or glossa. The poem based off an epigraph. What is a 28-line poem called? The poem which has 28 lines. What it is called? Ballade. Understood? Ballade. Line usually 8 to 10 syllables it has. Understand the 28 lines are there and divided into 3 octaves, 1 quatrain, and this is called envoy. This is called the last line of the stanza is called refrain. Refrain is the last line of this poem, and this is the last stanza of this poem. This is called refrain. Take a glance on what is a 24-line poem called. The poem which has 24 lines, this is called rondelle. Rondelle. Understood? It can be simple lyric with a refrain but in prosody, and a rondelle is a 24-line poem. Rondelle. Understood? with a different regular repeating rhyme structure. What are the three rules of a sonnet? Let's know about it again. Themes. Sonnet topic generally expresses strong emotion as well as such as love. And themes, rhyme scheme and structure. These are the three rules of a sonnet. And it has themes. Sonnet's topic generally expresses strong emotion like love. And a rhyme scheme, it must have a rhyme scheme like that. Rhyme scheme pattern, the rhyme scheme of Shakespeare rhyme scheme, A B A B C D C D E F U F G G. Then the structure. These poems are 14 lines long with a lyric scheme of A B C D C D E F U F G G and with an iambic pentameter also. Understood? So I'm repeating that again. How many stanzas is a sonnet? A sonnet has 3 stanzas. Understood? And it is written in iambic pentameter. The sonnet, the English sonnets here are the basic rules: subject, deep feelings, length, 14 lines. They are broken into 3 stanzas. Understood? And 4 lines are called quatrain. What is this 7-line poem called? The 7-line poem is called septet. What is the 5-line poem is called limerick. Understood? Limerick. The poem which has 7 lines is called septet. What is the rhyme pattern of a sonnet? So the like that Shakespearean sonnet, it is the rhyme scheme of A B C D C D E F G G. This is the rhyme scheme of sonnet. A sonnet usually consists of 2 parts. One is 8 line and another one is 8 line which is called octave, and another one is 6 lines which is called sestet. Understood? A sonnet usually consists of 2 parts. One is 8 line which is called octave and another one is 6 line. This is called sestet. Like that, if we keep our eyes on the Shakespearean sonnet, its rhyme scheme was A B C D C D E F U F G G. What is the meaning of epic literature? Epic is a genre of narrative defined by heroic or legendary adventures presented in a long format, originating in the form of epic poetry. The genre also now applies to epic theatre, epic films, music, novels, stage play, television series, as well as video games. Understood? Let's know more about it. An epic poem, or simply an epic, is a lengthy narrative poem. Which one? Epic. Typically about the extraordinary deeds of extraordinary characters who, in dealings with gods or others superhuman forces, gave shape to the mortal universe for descendants. So epic poems are so sacred, which are lengthy and narrative poem. What is the best definition of an epic? So epic is a long narrative poem in elevated state recounting the deeds of legendary or historical hero. Like that, Homer's Iliad, Odyssey are the Iliad and the Odyssey are the epics, the work of art, and that resembles suggestions on epic 60s ago. So these are some creations. These are some epics. Take a glance on the next point. What is an example of an epic in literature? In literature, the first epic was Gilgamesh, but in India, the first epic were Mahabharata as well as in Ramayana. Understood? The old English Beowulf, even Milton's Paradise Lost is sometimes classified as an epic. Epic on Gilgamesh is the first epic. And in India, Mahabharata as well as in Ramayana were the first epics. What are the features of an epic in literature? So epic has 6 elements. Take a glance on them. What are they? Like that plot centers around hero of unbelievable stature, involve deeds of superhuman strength and valor, vast setting, involves supernatural and or other worldly forces, sustained elevation of style. Poet remains subjective and omniscient. What is epic in Indian literature? Which I have already explained you now. The Ramayana and Mahabharata. These are the first epic in Indian literature. What is the first epic poem? So Gilgamesh is the first epic poem. What is epic known for? Epic system is one of the largest providers of health information. What is epic known for? Epic system is one of the largest providers of health information technology used primarily by the US hospitals. Understood? So, so leave it out. I'm just talking about epic that is on, and it is the system of largest providers of health information. This part is not acceptable. I will explain you the next one. What is another word of epic? So let's take a glance on it. That epic which I told you that the first epic was the Gilgamesh. The first epic was the Gilgamesh, and in India, in Indian English literature, and if you talk about the first epic, that Mahabharata as well as Ramayana. Understood? Let's know about the synonyms of most epic, like they're colossal, considerable, enormous, gigantic, humongous, monumental, siegeable. These are the synonyms of epic, and tremendous also. So why do we say epic? Epic comes from Greek word for song. Understood? Because Greek poets like Homer. Why do we say epic? Because epics are extracted from the Greek word. Understood? It comes from the Greek word for song. Because Greek poets like Homer song their poems, we tend to use epic for long, ambitious novels. This is called epic. This is a long, ambitious novels or movies. Epic can be used as an adjective, describes something historically important, lasting, or complex. Understood? How many types of epics are there? Epics can be divided into 2 types, like that the folk epic. Understood? And the developed through the oral tradition. Two main types of epics have been explicated, that folk epic and created and developed through the oral tradition, and the literary epic. And a literary epic refers to a single identified author. So what is the first epic in India, which I have told you, the Ramayana and Mahabharata. These are the first epic in India. Who is the father of epic poetry? Homer. Homer is considered as the father of epic poetry. And the author of Iliad as well as Odyssey, the Homer is the father of epic poetry. What is epic in English language? So in English, epic refers to a film, a poem, or a book that is long and contains lot of action, usually dealing with historical subject. Understood? Take a glance on vers libre. Vers libre. So vers libre in English, which the poetry whose lines do not have a regular pattern. And he published a series of poems in vers libre on contemporary themes. Free verse or vers libre. So free verse is also known as vers libre, a common feature of modernist poetry. Take a glance on what is called verse in English literature. A verse is a collection of metrical lines of poetry. It is a collection of metrical lines of poetry. It is used to define the difference of poetry as well as prose. And the verse contains rhythm and pattern. And more often than not, verse contains rhythm as well as pattern. Take a glance on how many types the verses are. Verses can be divided into three types: rhymed verse, blank verse, free verse. So rhyme verse is historically most commonly used form of verse in English. So verses are three types: rhymed verse, free verse, blank verse as well as free verse. And the blank verse is a poetry in regular metrical but unrhymed. Rhyme verse, historically the most commonly used form of verse in English. Blank verse, this is a poetry written in regular, metrical but unrhymed lines. Free verse is usually defined as having no fixed meter. This is called free verse. What is writing arranged in lines that have rhythm and that often rhyme at end? The synonym of verse is poetry, poems, lyrics, rhyme. Understood? These are the synonyms of verse. Why it is called verse? So it can sing chorously. Which one? Verse. Take me out to the ball game. But few realize there are also verses, including one that starts, Kartik Haji was baseball mat. So verse has extracted from the Latin word versus, which means a line of writing is based on the Proto-Indo-European root, which means torn or bent. Which one? Verse, which means torn or bent. How many lines a verse has? A verse may have 4 lines, maybe 8, or maybe 16 also. But as long as it is thoughtfully constructed, the length does not have matter. Let's know about tragedy. What is tragedy in literary terms? What is tragedy? Tragedy in literature is defined as a genre that focuses around a noble character who struggles against strong external challenges. The character will usually suffer greatly and fail as a result of their own flaws. Who defined tragedy? Aristotle, Greek philosopher Aristotle defines tragedy. What is tragedy according to Shakespeare? Shakespeare audience expected a play to one of 3 types. Comedy usually has happy ending. This is called comedy. And history play which dramatizes stories from the past. This is called history play. Or a tragedy which is characterized by death or disaster. According to Shakespeare, which is characterized by death and disaster, this is called tragedy. Who is the father of tragedy? Aeschylus. Aeschylus is called the father of tragedy. According to the philosopher Flavius Philostratus, Aeschylus was known as the father of tragedy. Who first wrote tragedy? Aeschylus, the first great tragedian. What are the 4 types of tragedy? The first, there is the complex tragedy of peripetia and anagnorisis. Second tragedy is suffering. And third tragedy, character. And fourth tragedy, spectacle. Tragedy of spectacle. The tragedy of character. The first tragedy, the complex tragedy. Second, the tragedy of suffering. Third, the tragedy of character. And the fourth one, the tragedy of spectacle. What are the themes of tragedy? Tragedy dealt with the big themes: love, loss, pride, abuse of power, and fraught relationship between man and God, or gods. These are the themes of tragedy. Why is Hamlet called a tragedy? Because the Hamlet is a revenge tragedy. It features element of tragedy common in his time, such as murder, ghosts, and someone seeking revenge. This is called revenge tragedy or tragedy. What was the first tragedy play? Aeschylus. Aeschylus' creation, the Persian, is recognized as the first tragedy play. Let's know about comedy. What is a comedy in English literature? A comedy is defined dramatic work that is written for the purpose to amuse or create entertainment among the audience. This is called comedy. What is called a comedy? Let's know. So you know that Midnight's Dream. Take a glance on. Comedy is a genre of fiction that consists of discourses, works intended to be humorous or amusing by inducing laughter, especially in theater, film, stand-up, comedy, television, radio, books, or any other entertainment medium. These are known as the comedy. What is comedy and its characteristics? What is comedy and its characteristics? So, comedy must have the happy ending. The comedy must have the happy ending and the taboo subjects, use of incongruence, juxtaposition. These are the characteristics of a comedy. What is the classic definition of comedy? So, comedy, entertainment such as plays and films, particular scene in them that are intended to make people, which intended to make people laugh. This is known as comedy. It must have a happy ending. It must have a happy ending. Let's know about fast comedy. This is Ralph Roister Doister, and it was written in 16th century by Nicholas Udall. The first comedy was Ralph Roister Doister. What is the purpose of the comedy? Comedy type drama or art for the chief object which according to modern notions, so which means which is used to amuse. This is known as comedy. Let's know about romantic comedy. Romantic comedy, it is also known as rom-com or rom-com, is a subgenre of comedy and a slice of fiction. What is romantic comedy according to Shakespeare? The comedies of incidents, comedies of mistaken identity, the plot is often driven by mistaken identity. Understood? Characters play scenes in disguise and common for female characters to disguise themselves as male characters. Understood? If the character plays scenes disguise and it's common for female characters to disguise themselves as male characters, this is known as romantic comedy. Comedies of incidents or comedies of identity. What is an example of romantic comedy? Take a glance on Shakespeare's comedies of the late 1590s. A Midsummer Night's Dream, Twelfth Night, As You Like It, Much Ado About Nothing, approaches the comedy of manners and The Merchant of Venice closer to tragic comedy. These are the romantic comedy in English literature. What was the first romantic comedy in English literature? The Freer Bacon and Prier Bonge, and it was written in 1591 and published in 1594. This is known as the successful fast romantic comedy in English, Freer Bacon and Prier Bonge. It was written in 1594 and brought out in 1590. It was written in 1591 and it was brought out in 1594. Who is the founder of romantic comedy in English literature? The Elizabethan dramatists, they were the founder of romantic comedy in English literature. Let's know about the revenge tragedy. Drama in which dominant motive is revenge for real or imaginary injury. Understood? The dominant motive which is revenge for a real or imagined injury. These are called the revenge tragedy. Like that, Shakespeare's Hamlet is also revenge tragedy. What is the element of revenge tragedy? What is the element of revenge tragedies? The quest of vengeance, promoting of the ghost of murdered kinsman, loved one scenes of real or feigned insanity, a play within a play, scenes in graveyards, scenes of carnage and mutilation. These are the elements of revenge tragedy. What was the first revenge tragedy in English literature? Spanish tragedy is the first revenge tragedy in English literature, and it was written by Thomas Kidd. The first revenge tragedy was Spanish tragedy. It was written by Thomas Kidd. This was the first revenge tragedy in English literature. What are the four revenge tragedies? The four revenge tragedies were Spanish tragedy, Revenger's tragedy, the Revenge Bossy of d'Amboise, and Atheist tragedy. Who is the father of revenge tragedy? So I told you that the first revenge tragedy was Spanish tragedy, and who is the father of revenge tragedy? Thomas Kidd. What are the five characteristics of revenge tragedy? What are the five characteristics of revenge tragedy? Ghost and the supernatural, murder, insanity, a character seeking revenge against a strong, personification of revenge, a clear villain. Comedy of humor. What is comedy of humor? The comedy of humor is a genre of dramatic comedy. Broadly, it focuses on a character or a range of characters. This is called comedy of humor, which has the overriding traits or humors, of which dominates their personality, desires, and conduct. What is it? This is comedy of humor. Who is known as the comedy of humors? Ben Jonson. The English playwright Ben Jonson is known as the comedy of humor, and from the late 16th century. What is the comedy of humors by Ben Jonson? The comedy of humors was a natural expression of genius. The term humor as used by Ben Jonson is based on ancient philosophical theory of four fluids found in the human body. What are the four humors in literature? Shakespeare understood human personality in the terms available to its age, that of new discarded theory of four bodily humors: blood, bile, melancholy, blood, bile, melancholy, and phlegm. These are the discarded theory of 4 bodily humors. What is comedy of manner in literature? A comedy of manner is concerned with social usage and the question of whether characters meet certain social standards. What are the characteristics of comedy of manners in literature? So, comedy of manners is the opposite of slapstick plays. It depends on rely upon physical actions and mimicry. Understood? What is the comedy of manners in Restoration age? The comedy of manners are also called a Restoration comedy and the most popular subgenre, although they ultimately uphold the status quo. Status quo means existing state of affairs. Understood? The comedy of manners, they are also known as Restoration comedy. Take a glance on who wrote the comedy of manners. The comedy manners was written by Molière. The works like The School of Wives, 1662, Tartuffe, 1664, and The Misanthrope, 1666. What are the conventions of comedy of manners? It implies a polite and well-bred behavior. Comedy of manners involves a sophisticated wit and a talent. The comedy of manners must have the sophisticated as well as talent. The comedy of manners, they are also called Restoration comedy. What is the comedy of manners and humors? Let's know about it. What is the comedy of manners and humors? The comedy of manners is often satirical and cynical in tone. The characters exaggerated the humors and providing main source of comedy. Let's know about who is the father of comedy of manners. The ancient Greek dramatist Menander, he is called the father of comedy of manners. What was the first comedy of manners? Much Ado About Nothing. Shakespeare's creation Much Ado About Nothing might be considered the first comedy of manners in English literature. Much Ado About Nothing. Much Ado About Nothing. Why is the comedy of manners called Restoration comedy? Why? The comedy of manners is also called Restoration comedy. Restoration comedy in English, comedy written and performed in the Restoration period. The comedy of manners, they were written in Restoration period during 1660 to 1670. That's why they are called comedy of manners or Restoration comedy. Let's know about the characteristic of comedy of manners. So, if we think about the elements of comedy of manners like love, marriage, treacherous persons, romantic dialogues, wit, and humor. These are the elements of comedy of manners or the Restoration comedy. So, dear students, you will mug up all of these. Don't leave out a single point because a few days left you will appear in exam. As soon as possible, all of your class will be completed. Understood? And having completed the literature part and the grammatical part will be grammatical point also. I will involve, I will count in, and if you will have any doubt, you can mention your doubt and take a glance on each point. So don't leave it out. Thanks a lot.